Hey guys, how you doing? It's Tom. When America was founded, the mainstream media was termed the Fourth Estate, and freedom of the press was put right into the First Amendment of the Constitution, right with freedom of speech. And the reason for that is the media, the Fourth Estate, was supposed to keep the government honest. And freedom of the press is of the utmost importance, and we must never lose that. But try to understand what has happened in America, because much like our politicians, right? The politicians get purchased by the big corporations at the top. So the corporations, either through lobbyists or funding to the super PACs or funding to the politicians or payments to the politician's wife or whatever it might be, family member, some backdoor payment. But the politicians are largely purchased by the big corporations, right? I mean, if we lived in an honest society, the politicians, the law they should pass is that politicians have to wear little badges on them the same way, or logos, the same way you see on NASCAR cars, right? I mean, we should know who's paying these people. So the corporations, they control the politicians, but you have to understand that if you come from a world of true power, true affluence, you start to think of different ways to gain power. So over time, 30, 40, 50 years, what happened is these big oligarchs at the top of society who control the politicians figured out, okay, well, yeah, we control the politicians, but we need propaganda for them. We can't have the mainstream media calling them out. So what they did is they used their money, their influence, and this is documented in things like the Church Committee, through the Rockefeller Foundation and these big oligarchs at the top, notice they're all tax exempt, right? They're tax exempt foundations because they say it's in the name of philanthropy and helping society, but it's actually their own personal money laundering schemes. This is what you see from the Clinton Foundation, right? They're all tax exempt. They're so altruistic. So anyway, you see through like the church committees and these big oligarchs at the top, big tax exempt foundations figured out, okay, we need propaganda for the politicians. And what they did is they used their money and influence to buy the mainstream media, either through outright ownership or through infiltration, paying journalists, that sort of thing. We saw from WikiLeaks the extensive list of journalists that were colluding with the Clinton campaign, right? And that's just one politician, but this stuff is widespread. And now you have, it's either 5 or 6 corporations control 90% of the mainstream media. So there's an illusion of choice, but there's not actual choice. So the only principle that the media has, right, because they're not about the news, they're a propaganda arm. So the mainstream media serves as the propaganda arm for the big oligarchs, the same oligarchs who control the politicians. And their only principle is maintaining power, maintaining control of the minds of the masses. It never amazes me how corrupt, how willing to lie the media is, but every now and then you just get a glimpse of just how truly morally reprehensible, morally bankrupt that the mainstream media really is. And I think we saw that this weekend. We saw that with the Olympics. Because Kim Jong-un, the North Korean dictator. Oh, and notice how terms are used to lie, right? North Korea is the Democratic People's Republic of North Korea. Well, that's how they use terms, and we see that here, right, through the Patriot Act, right? If you go against the Patriot Act, you're not a Patriot Act. So you have to look beyond the titles of things. So the mainstream media for the Olympics is praising the sister of Kim Jong-un, the dictator of North Korea. And if you're not familiar with North Korea, follow a guy named Michael Malice. He wrote a book on North Korea. He spent some time there. He actually grew up in the Soviet Union himself. Very informative guy. And if you followed him, you'd know that North Korea is the most oppressive regime in the world. Their people have no individual freedoms, right? Their actual stated goal as a government is to eliminate all free thought. Their stated goal is to create a population who serves as the body of Kim Jong-un, who is the mind of North Korea. And anyone who thinks differently is killed. So from the time their children are little in North Korea, they're either taken from their families to separate the child family, the parent-family bond, and they're put into schools, and they're told to, as part of their assignments, they have to report on whatever their parents are talking about, throughout the week. And the children report, and if the parents talk about anything that goes against the government, they get put into concentration camps, right? They get put into gulags. So we hear the media, right? They claim to be so moral, they're so against Nazi Germany, but they're praising a dictator who has a system of concentration camps in the modern world. And these are slave camps where people have no trials. Their only crime is they go against the government. There's no trial. You're thrown in these concentration camps, and you might never be released. You have to work horrible labor. You're not fed food. And many people, millions and millions of people are executed all the time in North Korea. In fact, the North Korean regime is so oppressive that when Kim Jong-un's father was in power, he actually intentionally starved thousands and thousands of people to death to secure his hold on power, right? If the government controls the food, they can starve the people until the people submit. We saw this in the communist Soviet Union. Stalin starved millions of Ukrainians to death intentionally in the 1930s in order to secure his hold on power. If you try to leave North Korea, you are executed, and not only you, but your family will be either imprisoned or executed. And whenever they send diplomats out into the world for diplomatic reasons, their family has to always stay behind, and the diplomats know that if they say anything against North Korea, that if they don't come back, their family will be held responsible. Their children will be held responsible. So the mainstream media likes to virtue signal all the time that, people that think freely, people that stand up against government-mandated equality and just want equality of opportunity, equality under the law, they call those people racist. They'll say, a lot of those people tend to lean right, libertarian, Republican, and they'll say, those people, they don't want to give you reparations for slavery or whatever it might be. Yet the mainstream media has no problem praising slave owners today, because the people of North Korea, they're not serving at will. They are enslaved by a dictator, because if they speak out against him, they're killed or thrown in a concentration camp. If they try to leave, their family members are either thrown in a concentration camp or executed. These people are slaves, and the mainstream media is talking about how elegant and beautiful and how statesman Kim Jong-un's sister is. The slave master. The media is not interested in the situation that these people find themselves in. The media is interested in their own power. And right now, the oligarchy at the top, all you have to do is watch the media, is clearly very against Donald Trump, which is probably the greatest argument for him. So the mainstream media will praise a slave master and then try to virtue signal and get everyone angry about slavery, which took place 150 years ago in America. 150 plus years ago in America. So the media is very disingenuous. They don't care about slavery in America. They don't care about black people. They don't care about the people that are currently slaves in North Korea. They only care about their own power. And at the current moment, their own power, Trump has been very public with how he's going about North Korea. I don't necessarily agree with that, but the point is that Trump has been at odds with North Korea, so the media is going to take North Korea's side. Be damned if their people are enslaved. Be damned if their people are starved to death. Because the media doesn't care about people, the media cares about power. So the media will tell you that America is this horrible place because Donald Trump wants to build a wall, because he's talked openly about the contradiction of having a welfare state where you're taxing people high amounts of money and then you're letting people come into America and you're redistributing their money to people that are coming into America illegally. So he's trying to stop illegal immigration, and they'll say, oh, that's hateful. He wants to build a wall. America isn't about walls. But notice that a wall in America involves keeping people out who are trying to come in. But a wall in North Korea is designed to keep their people from leaving. And it might not be a literal wall, but it's a wall of soldiers with guns, and if you try to leave, they shoot you. They execute you. So everything the media does is just one giant virtue signal. And of course, the media has no problem propping up a communist dictatorship, because the media, because of the oligarchs at the top, this is why they promote socialism. They say it's in the name of altruism. They say it's in the name of helping people, right? But it's not. It's actually in the name of enslaving people. They want a permanent class of people dependent on the government. So this is why the media promotes the dependency state. So they have no problem promoting a communist dictatorship that enslaves its people, that doesn't let its people leave. Because the media doesn't want you to know the truth about centralized power. The reason individual liberty is always the answer. I mean, put it in this perspective, right? They say, oh, socialism, increased state power. Oh, communism, it's not so bad, increased state power. Communism, right? That is the proletariat's revolution that will free the people, free the proletariat from the control of the bourgeoisie. Well, in America, we have checks and balances. In America, there are constitutional restrictions. So in America, the government has to at least give you a trial, even if our justice system isn't great, which it's not. At least you get a trial. At least a jury has to find you guilty. In America, at least you have freedom of speech. The government can't throw you in a concentration camp because you say something that goes against them. You have freedom of speech. Well, look how corrupt our government is in spite of all of those protections, right? The American government is corrupt to its core, and we have all these protections. Well, when you give more and more power to the government, more and more centralized control, which communism requires absolute centralized control, right? Because the government has to be able to confiscate the property of everyone in society. And anyone who goes against them needs to have their property taken, and if they resist, they need to be locked in jail cells. So if you speak up against that, you're resisting, you need to be locked in jail cells. So in America, we have all these constitutional protections, and the government's still corrupt. But now you want socialism and communism, where you're giving the government even more authority to take away individual rights in the name of collectivism, in the name of quote-unquote utopia. Well, you take away those rights that give us basic protections and create this communist system. Well, imagine how corrupt that becomes, right? When you don't have any of these basic rights, when the government can silence you for speaking up against them, when the government can confiscate your property. It always leads to North Korea. It always leads to enslavement. But the media doesn't care about that because they represent the big oligarchical class at the top. So the media doesn't care if we're enslaved. And this has been shown historically, time and time again. This is what happened in the Soviet Union, a form of collectivism, communism. Millions, hundreds of millions of people, it's estimated anywhere between 20 and 100 million people, executed, democide by their government for speaking up, for going against the government. It happened under Mao in China, 100 million people executed, locked in concentration camps for going against the government. It happened under fascism, under Adolf Hitler, which is another form of collectivism, increased government control. 4 million people executed in 4 years, or 6 million people executed in 4 years. If you give away our individual liberty, which is what the mainstream media wants you to do, and they show that time and time again, if you give away our individual liberty to the media, under the name of altruism, under the name of, oh, but there are poor people, you are making sure these people are permanently poor by doing that. Because when you give the government power, the government will use that power. They'll say it's in the name of altruism. They'll say it's in the name of charity, just like they did in the Soviet Union, just like they did under Mao in China. Just like Hitler said it was for the greatness of the people of Germany. It's never for the greatness of the people. It's only for the greatness of those in power. And the mainstream media, they serve those at the highest level of power. And they show how morally bankrupt they are because they're interested in brainwashing. They're not interested in real intellectualism. Because if they were being intellectually honest, they would say that they're against the way Trump runs the government. That's fine. I have plenty of criticisms of Trump. But they would condemn the communist dictatorship that is Kim Jong-un's North Korea every chance at every turn. They would make the public aware of just how oppressive the regime is and just how oppressive communism becomes every time, just as oppressive as it has become every time historically. But the media is not interested in that. They're not interested in intellectual truth. They're interested in power. If you want a good society where people could prosper, you have to stop falling for the lies that the state is trying to help. It's charity. It's a veil of charity. But underneath it is state power, the power of the oligarchy. And the answer is what it's always been: individual liberty. Fight for freedom of speech. Fight for people's rights to live their lives not how you like, right? That's why I'm for gay marriage. I don't care. You want to get married, get married. Fight for people's rights to live their lives not how you approve, but in a free way. Meaning, if they don't violate the individual rights, they don't initiate force against anyone else or anyone else's property, then they could do whatever they want. It should be a society outside of race, because it's how they control us. It's why they talk about race 24/7. Everything's racist. Everything's xenophobic. Because they know if they do that, it gives a mechanism to control society. Just like we separated church and state, we need to separate race and state. Just individual liberty for everyone. Everyone has the same exact rights, the same exact liberties. The government's not going to come in and try to prop people up because there's, quote unquote, some inequality. The government claims there's inequality, like the wage gap and stuff like that, between women and men, so that they can increase state power in the name of creating equality. But they're actually creating more inequality. Everything's very backwards. If you want to know more about that, look up the difference between equality of outcome versus equality of opportunity, which is individual rights and freedom. The mainstream media is morally bankrupt. Follow Michael Malice. Look up how these people live in North Korea, and you will find out just how little the mainstream media cares about you.